Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Rowe. We're taking a look at intermediate algebra. This is part B. We're focusing on lesson 13, numbers 5 through 8. So this is a continuation of rational equations. So again, what we're going to do in all of these problems is we're going to use the LCD to make the problem simpler. And then we're going to solve whatever equation is left for the variable. So let's take a look at the LCD in this particular problem. The LCD is the most important part of this whole process. Remember, the LCD is a combination of all of the factors in the denominator. So we've got 10x, we've got x minus 2, and we've got a 5x in the denominator, all three of these. So we have to find the multiples that are in common here. So x minus 2 stands out to me because it's a binomial. You can't separate parts of a binomial here, so that has to be part of the LCD. Now, we take a look at 10x and 5x. What thing is in common between 10x and 5x? Well, they both have an x. And what's the smallest number that both divide into? Well, 10. So 10x times x minus 2 is the LCD. So at this point, we're going to multiply every term by the LCD. So we're going to distribute that to every term, all three of these terms. So 10x times x minus 2, and we're going to multiply that by 4 over 10x. We're going to subtract, and because we're subtracting, I'm going to put everything after that in parentheses just to make sure I don't forget a negative sign if I need it. 10x times x minus 2, and we're going to multiply that by 3 over x minus 2. And that's going to equal 10x times x minus 2 times 7 over 5x. So we're going to multiply all these things now to cancel out the fractions, leaving us with just an equation that we can solve sort of easily. So let's see what cancels here. So let's take a look at the first term. So if I'm looking at the first term, I notice that this has a 10x and my denominator is 10x. So because those are the same, those are going to cancel. And that's going to leave me with 4 times x minus 2. Okay, minus, what happens in this? Well, the x minus 2's are in common, so we're going to cancel those out. And that's going to leave me with 10x times 3. And on the other side, what do I have here? Well, I don't have anything that just straight up cancels out except this x. Now remember, I can't do anything with these. These two are attached together for life. They're married. Those x's can cancel out. And now I can also reduce the 10 and the 5 because 5 goes into 10 2 times. So I can cancel that, making that a 1, and that will become a 2. So I'll have 2 times x minus 2, and then I have a 7. So that's it's still complicated, but it's a lot better looking than what we started with, which is all those fractions. So now our next goal is to follow our multi-step process to simplify. Remember, the first thing we do is we distribute where we need to. So we're going to distribute. So let's distribute. So I can distribute here. And that gives me 4x minus 8. I'm going to go ahead and simplify this middle term here. That's 10x times 3 is 30x, and it's minus, so minus 30x. That's really not distributed, but it's still something I can do here. Now on the other side here, I've got a 7 times x minus 2 times 2. So I can go ahead and I can multiply these two things. Remember, we have commutative property, so I can rearrange things and multiply them in any order I want to. 7 times 2 is 14. So I'm going to distribute 14 to both of these terms. So that's going to give me 14x minus 28. So at this point, I've got a multi-step problem. I've got 4x minus 8 minus 30x equals 14x minus 28. So I'm going to go over to my next screen so I have more room. And I could have probably done my next step on there, but let's not get too much stuff on one page. That's a 3. All right, so in the multi-step process, step 1 is to distribute, step 2 is to combine terms on the same side. Well, none of these terms combine, so over here I can combine 4x and 30x. So that's 4x minus 30x, which is negative 26x minus 8 will equal 14x minus 28. Step 1, distribute. Step 2, combine terms. Step 3, get the variables on the same side using either addition or subtraction. So in this case, I'm going to take the smallest variable, which is the one I like to move. In this case, the smallest one is negative 26. So I'm going to add 26 to each side. Would it be wrong to subtract 14x? No. But it just makes my variable positive when I do it this way. So that gives me 40x minus 28. And at this point, if you don't have a two-step equation, you know you've kind of messed up somewhere, so go back and double check. So we got two-step equation. We're going to add 28 to each side. So that leaves me with positive 20 equals 40x, which leaves me a one-step equation. So I'm going to divide by 40 to solve. And x is going to equal 1/2. And so there you go. And now I want you to look. I went over 2 pages on this slideshow here to get all that work in. So if you're trying to fit all your work in like 1/2 inch, it ain't going to work out. I need to see all this work. So if you make a little error, I can help you out with your revision. All right, here's the next one. We got x plus 5 divided by 6 minus 3 equals 4x minus 5 divided by 3. Again, I'm going to use an LCD to cancel out any fractions so that I'm just left with a little simpler equation that I can solve. So what's the LCD in this particular problem? Well, the only fractions I have are 6 and 3. So the common denominator between 6 and 3 is 6. What's the smallest thing that 6 and 3 divide into? Would it be wrong to use 18? No. But would it be easier just to use 6? Yes. So again, look for the smallest thing that both of these numbers go into. So we're going to multiply by 6. And again, distribute that to 8 each term. So 6 times x plus 5 over 6 minus 3 times 6 equals 6 times 4x minus 5 divided by 3. And now we're going to reduce and see what we got left. All right, so first term, 6's will cancel each other out. So that's just going to leave me with x plus 5. I can go ahead and multiply 3 times 8, or excuse me, 3 times 6, which is 18. And now what happens on the other side? Well, 3 and 6 don't cancel, but 3 will go into 6 2 times, leaving me with 2 times 4x minus 5. And so now we just have a multi-step equation with variables on both sides. So we go through that process again, distribute if we need to. Well, we do need to distribute. So let's distribute right there. And I know I could do multiple steps on one thing, but I'm showing all my work because that's what I'm always asking you to do. So I'm going to do it too. 2 times 4x is 8x. 2 times 5 is 10. Step 2, combine like terms on the same side. Remember, at this point, we're going to draw a line. We're not going to do anything across the line. We're just going to combine terms. Only terms I have that will combine are 5 minus 18. 5 minus 18 gives me negative 13 or minus 13. So at this point, I've got a multi-step equation with variables on both sides. And now it's just a matter of getting the variables on the same side. So I'm going to go to the next screen. I've got x minus 13 equals 8x minus 10. Remember, I want to move the smaller variable to the side where the larger variable is. In this case, a single x is smaller than 8x. So that gives me negative 13 equals 7x, because there's assumed 1 right there, minus 10. And again, at this point, if you don't have a two-step equation or a one-step equation, you know you need to go back and look. So we're going to add 10 to each side. That gives me negative 3. And a good old one-step equation. And so my final answer here is x equals negative 3/7. So again, just follow this process. Again, you see, it took me nearly 2 pages. I probably could have squeezed it all right in there, but you wouldn't have been able to see a whole lot. So again, if you're taking one line to show all this work, I'm going to ask you to do it again, so you might as well just do it the first time. All right, so here's the next one. So this one's set up like a straight proportion, kind of similar to the first problem in this lesson. So really all we need to do here, we don't need to find an LCD in this one. We can just do a cross product. So we're going to multiply those cross products. So I've got 2 times x plus 1, and I'm multiplying that by 10. And on the other side, I've got 20 times x plus 2. Don't forget your parentheses, because that helps you remember that you're going to need to distribute. So now at this point, I've got 2 times x plus 1 times 10. Well, I can multiply these numbers using commutative property. 2 times 10 is 20. So I've got 20 times x plus 1 equals 20 times x plus 2. Now, I could show you a step here, but that might not work out every time. So I'm going to follow my rules. I'm going to distribute. So that gives me 20x plus 20 equals 20x plus 40. And then we'll get my variables on the same side. And in this particular instance, I'm not saying this is how yours is going to work out, because I can already tell you it doesn't. Because I've got 20 equals 40, all my variables are gone. This will have no solution. All right. Last example for this lesson. This is the most complicated of our examples. So here we have binomials and a trinomial. So what you want to do first is you want to make sure you know what all of your terms are going to be. So in the previous lesson, we learned how to factor a trinomial. So we're going to factor this trinomial. What factors of 15 add to be 8? Well, that's 3 and 5. Remember, following the rules. So 15 or 3 and 5 go in our factors. Remember, it's multiples of 15 that add to be 8, and then if it's the same signs, we get the same signs in our binomials. So look at that. It's the same thing as the other two. So that is our LCD. Remember, LCD is a combination of all the factors. If there were different factors here, then part of those factors would also have to be part of the LCD. But since that's it, that's our LCD. So we're going to multiply our LCD times each one of our terms. So there's the first one. Plus. And then the last one, let's see if I can squeeze this in. All right, so I got all that squeezed in there. That's a 15 right there. So now we cancel things out that will cancel. So looking at the first one, here's my denominator. I'm looking for a common term. Well, that's the x minus 3, so those are going to cancel. So that leaves me with x minus 5, and I'm multiplying that by x. I'm going to put the x in front. What about the second term here? Well, they have the x minus 5 in common, so those are going to cancel. So that's going to leave me with 2 times x minus 3. Now on the other side, while it doesn't look like anything's in common, remember we factored this at the beginning and figured out it was the same thing as both of those terms. So that whole thing's going to cancel out with that, leaving negative 8. So now, again, factor any trinomials that are there. The LCD is a combination of all the binomial terms. So in this case, we had 2 different binomial terms. So that's our LCD. Multiply by each of the terms, cancel out what cancels out. And so at this point, we're down to x times x minus 5 plus 2 times x minus 3 equals negative 8. Multi-step equation, variables on both sides. So go through our process, distribute if we need to. X times x is x squared. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times negative 3, negative 6 equals negative 8. Combine like terms. So in this particular problem, I've got like terms right here. So that's going to leave me with x squared minus 3x minus 6 equals negative 8. And we're not done yet. So this is actually a quadratic equation. So remember, for a quadratic, what we want to do is we want to get all terms on the same side. So I'm going to add 8 to each side. And then we're going to factor to solve in this one. Because it's quadratic, we're going to have to factor and set each factor equal to 0. So we want to find factors of 2 that add to be 3. Well, the only factors of 2 are 2 and 1. So our factors will be x with a 2, x with a 1. Remember, this tells us that the signs are the same or different. Plus sign means that the signs are the same. This is what goes in both if they're the same. And now at this point, to get your answers, you set each factor equal to 0. And then you solve the one-step equation. And so there's your 2 answers. So I hope this helps you with lesson 13, numbers 5 through 8. If you're still struggling with the concept or need more help, please send me a teacher message or make an appointment for a help session.